The first thing they noticed was the silence. It wasn't the quiet of a forgotten forest or the muffled hush of thick fog. It was heavier, like the ground itself was holding its breath. Even the wind seemed reluctant to move across the ridges of the Appalachian hills, as if it knew what lay beneath. "I don't like this," Hannah whispered, tightening the strap of her backpack. She was the youngest of the group, barely 22, but her eyes carried the restless energy of someone who had read too many ghost stories and hoped, deep down, that at least one of them was real. Marcus, the tallest and the loudest, grinned as he stomped ahead on the gravel path. "That's the point, Hannah. If you liked it, we'd be hiking a nature trail, not walking into the most haunted mine east of the Mississippi." He turned to the others, his voice echoing a little too sharply off the trunks of trees. "Right, crew? This is what we came for. The big story. The mystery of Harrow's Hollow." The name alone seemed to sour the air. Harrow's Hollow, a town abandoned in the late 1940s after the mine accident. No bodies were ever recovered. No explanation was ever agreed upon. Just a shift of 14 miners who walked into the shaft one October evening and never came back out. Their families left, one by one, and within 2 years, the settlement was gone. Buildings left to rot, windows staring blankly at the woods. "Or maybe," said Greg, the oldest of the group, his voice low and almost academic, "it's not haunted at all. Maybe it's just carbon monoxide poisoning, or an unmarked collapse. The mountain doesn't need monsters to swallow men." Marcus shot him a look. "Man, you're like Wikipedia in human form. We're not here to solve it with science. We're here to feel it, to document it. This is about the thrill." But Hannah noticed the way Greg avoided the yawning, black mouth of the mine as it appeared in the distance, framed by sagging beams and rusted equipment. Even skeptics had shadows in their eyes when they stood in front of Harrow's Hollow. They reached the fence just before dusk. A tall chain-link barrier stretched across the slope, its rusted warning signs barely legible. "No entry, hazard area." Beyond it, the woods gave way to the crumbling outlines of old shacks and, farther still, the dark gash of the mine entrance. "Guess Uncle Sam doesn't want us going in," Marcus said, smirking as he pulled a pair of bolt cutters from his pack. The metal links groaned under the pressure, and with a sharp snap, the fence gave way. "Jesus," Greg muttered, glancing over his shoulder, as if expecting headlights to sweep across the abandoned road. "You realize this is trespassing, right? If the cops—" "No cops," Marcus interrupted, forcing a gap wide enough for them to slip through. "No guards. No one gives a damn about Harrow's Hollow anymore. That's why it's perfect." Hannah ducked through after him, the broken wires snagging her jacket. She hesitated a moment on the other side, staring at the mine entrance. The air that drifted from it felt colder, damp, with a sour edge, like something exhaled from underground. "Feels wrong," she whispered. "Feels like history," Marcus corrected, already setting down his backpack and pulling out the gear. His grin was wide, but Hannah thought it looked stretched too thin across his face. Greg came last, muttering under his breath as he slipped through the torn fence. He didn't like rules being broken, but something in his eyes suggested he didn't like the thought of turning back more. And so, the four of them stood at the edge of Harrow's hollow mine, geared up, hearts quickening, the mine waiting with the patience of a grave. Inside, the mine swallowed them instantly. Their lantern lights stretched forward in thin beams, cutting into the darkness like scalpels. The wooden supports creaked, swollen from decades of damp. Every step sent echoes chasing down the tunnels, echoes that sometimes returned with a delay too long to feel natural. "Okay," Greg said, his recorder already running. His voice was steady, but his hands trembled just enough for Hannah to notice. "We're about 50 yards into the main shaft. Support beams are intact, though some decay is evident. Temperature is cooler than outside, maybe 10 degrees lower. Air feels heavier." "Don't narrate like it's the Discovery Channel," Marcus teased. "Just let it breathe, man. Let the mine tell its own story." But the mine had been silent for 70 years, and silence was often louder than any scream. They came to a fork in the tunnel. The left path sloped downward, where the dark seemed to thicken like tar. The right continued straight, marked by a faded wooden sign whose letters had been eaten by rot. "Down or straight?" Hannah asked, her voice hushed, though she didn't mean it to be. Marcus tapped his flashlight against his palm. "Down, obviously. That's where they disappeared, right?" Greg frowned. "We don't know that. Records say they entered through the main shaft, but..." "Exactly," Marcus cut him off. "They went in. They didn't come out. So we go deeper. That's the story. That's the point." For a moment, Hannah swore she heard something, like the faint scrape of stone against stone, far below. She froze, but when she looked at the others, none of them reacted. Only her. "Fine," Greg sighed, "but we mark the path. If we go too far without exit points, we turn back. Agreed?" No one answered. But they all knew the mine had its own rules, and agreements might not matter. The deeper they went, the more the world changed. Walls wept with condensation. Their boots sank into mud that hadn't seen daylight in decades. In places, the air felt so tight, it was like breathing through cloth. The lantern light picked up strange formations, stalactites that seemed to twist like frozen fingers, mineral stains that resembled faces mid-scream. And then they found the helmet. It was lying half buried in silt, dented on one side. Rust had eaten most of the surface, but the leather chin strap was still intact, hanging limply like a tongue. Hannah crouched down, her heart thundering. "Do you think?" Greg knelt beside her, his hands steady now. He brushed away the dirt carefully. Inside the helmet, where skull fragments should have been, there was only a smear of black residue. "That's not rust," Greg said quietly. "Looks like soot," Marcus suggested, though his voice lacked conviction. But Hannah had already stepped back. The smell rising from the helmet was wrong. Not iron, not smoke. Something older. Something sour-sweet, like rotted fruit. She tried to speak, but the mine spoke first. From somewhere far ahead, deep in the tunnel where their lights couldn't reach, came the sound of knocking. 3 slow, deliberate knocks, as if someone or something wanted out. The knocking came again. 3 heavy strikes, slow and deliberate, echoing through the rock. Each blow seemed to reverberate not just through the tunnel, but through their chests, rattling ribs and teeth. Then, silence. A silence so deep it felt staged, like the mine itself was waiting for their reaction. "Tell me that's water dripping," Hannah said, clutching her flashlight tighter. "That was no drip," Marcus muttered. His grin was gone now, replaced by a stiffness around his mouth. "That was someone." "Someone?" Greg's laugh was thin, bitter. "Marcus, it's been 70 years. Whoever was knocking is either long dead or not something we want to meet." Ethan, who had been unusually quiet since they entered, finally spoke. His voice was soft, almost reverent. It didn't sound hostile. It sounded like signaling. "Signaling what?" Hannah shot back. "That it's time to get buried alive?" The silence pressed closer, wrapping around them. For a moment, none of them breathed. Then, from far down the left tunnel, came the sound of stone sliding against stone, as if something massive had shifted in the dark. Marcus raised his lantern higher, forcing bravado back into his voice. "Okay, left tunnel it is. That's where the action is. That's where we'll find the story." Greg grabbed his arm. "This isn't a game, Marcus. You hear that? Rockfall. You go down there without knowing the structure, it could collapse. We'll be lucky to crawl out alive." Marcus yanked his arm free. "You want to go back to your hotel bed? Fine. But I didn't haul gear through the mountains to turn around because of a spooky knock." Ethan adjusted his pack, his expression unreadable. "Maybe we should follow, carefully, just far enough to see." Hannah stared at him. "Why are you so calm about this?" Ethan blinked slowly, as if pulling himself out of some private thought. "Because sometimes you don't get to choose whether you follow the call. Sometimes the call chooses you." No one had an answer for that. They moved down the left tunnel. The air thickened with every step. Their lights wavered across slick walls, beams catching odd grooves carved into the stone. At first, they looked like natural striations. But the deeper they went, the clearer the patterns became. Shapes resembling crude tools, or maybe symbols, hacked into the rock with obsessive repetition. "See this?" Greg whispered, running his gloved hand along one of the marks. These weren't made by miners' picks. Too shallow, too deliberate. Miners cut for ore, not for patterns. "Maybe the miners found them," Ethan suggested. His eyes gleamed strangely in the lantern light. "Maybe that's why they went missing." Hannah shook her head. Missing or not, they wouldn't just vanish. Something made them disappear. "Exactly," Ethan said, almost smiling. Another sound interrupted them. This time, not knocking, breathing. It came faintly from the dark ahead, wet, labored, like lungs heavy with dust. It lasted only a few seconds before vanishing, but it left them frozen in place. "Did you hear?" Hannah began. "Yes," Marcus said quickly. He licked his lips, shining his light into the black. "Hello? Is anyone down there?" His voice bounced back in a strange rhythm. The echo repeated the word "there" 3 times, each one quieter. But the last one didn't fade away naturally. It cut off sharply, like something had swallowed it mid-sound. Greg's face went pale. "Echoes don't do that," Sound doesn't just stop. Ethan stepped forward. Ignoring the others' protests, he lowered his lantern close to the ground, studying the mud. "Footprints," he murmured. The others crowded in. Sure enough, the ground bore the imprint of boots. Old, heavy boots with rounded toes, the kind miners would have worn. But the mud was fresh, wet, disturbed as if someone had walked here only hours ago. "That's not possible," Greg whispered. "These men vanished in 1948. Or they never left," Ethan said softly. The tunnel opened into a wider chamber. Their lanterns revealed abandoned equipment, rusted wheelbarrows, broken drills, shovels half buried in mud. Helmets hung from nails hammered into the wall, some still with straps dangling like nooses. "God," Hannah breathed, her skin crawling. "It's like they just stopped, dropped everything, and walked off." Marcus scanned the chamber with wide eyes. "This is it. This is the story. The lost shift of Harrow's Hollow. We found where they ended." "No," Greg said sharply. He pointed at the wheelbarrows. The metal sides weren't rusted through. They were clawed. Long gouges raked across the surface, deep and jagged, the kind no pickaxe could make. Before anyone could answer, the knocking returned. This time, it wasn't 3 measured strikes. It was faster, frantic, like fists pounding stone. It echoed all around them, as if the walls themselves were alive and begging to be let out. And then, just as suddenly, it stopped, leaving behind only one sound: a whisper. Low, close, curling through the chamber as if spoken right into Hannah's ear. "Go back." The words hung in the chamber like smoke. Hannah clutched her arms around herself, her flashlight trembling in her grip. "I'm not crazy," she whispered. "You heard it. Someone told us to leave." "No one told us anything," Marcus snapped, though his own voice cracked under the strain. "It's just air in the tunnels. Sounds get weird underground. You all know that." Greg shook his head slowly. "That wasn't air. That was a voice. Human. Distinct. And it knew we were here." Ethan tilted his head, studying the shadows as if they held a secret. "If it told us to go back," he said softly, "doesn't that mean it's something alive down here?" "Alive?" Hannah almost shouted. "After 70 years? That's impossible!" But the word impossible felt fragile, weak, like paper in her mouth. Marcus stepped toward the gouged wheelbarrow, running his hand over the ragged scratches. "Look, this proves it. Whatever happened, it wasn't a cave-in or gas. Something else was here. Something real. And if there's still something down here, that's our story." "Our story?" Greg's voice rose with anger. "You think a headline's worth your life? Because mine sure as hell isn't." Marcus turned, his face caught in the lantern light, sweat glistening on his brow. "We're not going back now. We've come this far. If we stop here, it's just another campfire tale. But if we keep going, if we find the truth, we'll have proof. We'll make history. Or end up part of it," Greg muttered darkly. Ethan's lantern beam swept the chamber wall. "Look," he said. His voice carried no urgency, but it froze them all. Along the far wall was a set of wooden planks, warped with age but still standing, sealing off a tunnel mouth. Nails jutted out like teeth, black with rust. On the boards were more of the same strange markings carved into the rock. Lines, symbols, scratches that repeated over and over in unnatural patterns. It wasn't a collapse. It was a door. A door someone had built to keep something in. "No," Greg whispered, shaking his head violently. "Absolutely not. That's a sealed section. It was sealed for a reason. We open that and we find out what really happened," Marcus interrupted. His eyes blazed now, more with obsession than courage. He dropped his pack, pulling out a small crowbar. "Marcus!" Hannah grabbed his arm. Her voice was trembling but fierce. "Did you not hear the voice? Did you not feel that? It doesn't want us here. Whatever's behind those boards, it warned us. And warnings are not something you ignore in a place like this." "Or," Marcus said, wrenching his arm free, "warnings mean there's something valuable enough to protect. Secrets, maybe even relics. Why else seal it shut?" Greg barked a laugh, hollow and desperate. "Relics? You're insane. You really think miners were hiding treasure? They sealed it because something down there wanted out. And they couldn't let it." The air in the chamber seemed to pulse, as if the mine itself leaned closer to hear their argument. Ethan set his lantern on the ground, the glow rising eerily across his face. "We're not supposed to leave," he murmured. All three turned to him. "What?" Hannah asked, her stomach tightening. Ethan looked at her, eyes distant and cold. The knocking, the breathing, the voice. It didn't tell us to leave. It tested us. It wanted to see if we'd listen. And we didn't. That means we've been chosen. Hannah recoiled as though struck. Chosen for what? Ethan smiled faintly, as if the answer was obvious. To go deeper. Marcus jammed the crowbar between two planks, wood splintering under the pressure. "Stop!" Greg shouted, lunging forward. "You don't know what you're doing." The board cracked with a sharp snap, echoing like a gunshot through the chamber. The sound rippled into the tunnels, awakening something in the dark beyond. From behind the boards came a single, unmistakable sound. A long, dragging inhale, like the first breath of something that had been waiting to wake. The tunnel beyond the boards wasn't a crawl space, but a forgotten gallery, broad enough for a cart, braced by sagging timbers. A rusted ventilation duct ran along the left wall, and rails glinted faintly through the mud. The air was still, colder than before, with that metallic sweetness that clung to the throat. "See?" Marcus whispered, eyes alight. "Not a grave, a corridor." Hannah said nothing. She kept her beam steady on details. The chalk tally marks scratched into a beam, the coil of abandoned cable, paint flaking from the duct. Greg crouched by the tracks. The mud there was scarred, as if something heavy had rolled through years after the mine's closure. 20 steps in, they found the locker, a dented steel cabinet bolted to the wall. Its door was bound with wire, twisted tight. Greg unwound it carefully. The hinges gave a long metallic groan. Inside lay a canvas satchel, mildewed and stiff, stamped with the company logo. Greg set it on a half-buried crate, undid the snaps, and pulled free a folder swollen with damp. "Read it," Marcus breathed, reverent, as if before an altar. Greg placed the lantern close, opened the folder, and began. The edges crumbled, but the type and the hurried notes in pencil remained legible. Hannah leaned in. Even Ethan, usually withdrawn, stepped closer. Extracts from the folder: Harrow County Sheriff's Department, Case File 48-1022C. Location: Harrow's Hollow Mine, Section C. Prepared by Sergeant Daniel R. Pike, badge number 214, with Deputy Louise Mercer, badge number 077. Date, time, October 22nd, 1948, over 2:15 hours. Conditions: night, 41 degrees Fahrenheit, mist at tree line. Power down, acetylene lamps carried. Methane within tolerance at main gallery. Oxygen thin below. Subject: 14 miners entered Section C, October 21st, 1948, 1840 hours. No return by 2 o'clock hours. Action: rescue team of 6 entered under Foreman A. Culver. Sheriff. Presence requested following report of abnormal behavior. 2:31. Entry: heard rhythmic impacts, 3 count from lower drifts. Not typical of rock stress. 2:47. Tools abandoned mid-task. Wheelbarrows overturned. Rails scarred by marks inconsistent with wheels. 2:52. Located 2 miners. No response to names. Pupils dilated, skin clammy. Uttered phonemes not English, German, or local dialect. Deputy Mercer notes 3-beat repetition. 2:55. Subject number 1 approached without aggression, then suddenly attacked Deputy Mercer. No weapon. Strength abnormal. Breath odor metallic, sweet. 0304. Symbols noted on walls. Spirals, interlaced lines. Not consistent with ore extraction. Foreman, not ours. 316. More miners deeper in drift. Agitated. One striking wall repeatedly with blunt pick. No escape attempt. 322. Rapid environmental change. Temperature drop approximately 10 to 12 degrees Fahrenheit within 60 seconds. Lamp sputtered. Echoes cut short. Last syllables truncated. 327. Escalation. Subjects turned violent against one another. Details omitted by Sheriff's order. See Addendum B. Rescue halted. Withdrawal ordered. Decision: by order of Sheriff Harrow, badge number 001, and Superintendent J. Mallory, Appalachian Coal Consolidated, Section C, sealed permanently. Official cause: structural instability, asphyxiant accumulation. Directive: records to remain on site, unretrieved. Truth must stay buried. The town must remain calm. Signed, Sergeant Daniel R. Pike, October 22nd, 1948, 5:11 hours. Greg lowered the paper. Silence pressed against them. Even the air seemed unwilling to move. So that's it, Hannah whispered. They saw the miners lose themselves. They turned on each other, and the rescue team sealed it to hide the truth. To protect the town, Greg added quietly, but the words carried no comfort. Marcus let out a thin laugh and closed the folder. He pressed his palm flat against the wall. This isn't the end of the story. It's just where they stopped writing. We're stopping here too, Greg snapped. We go back. We take the folder. Let experts handle this. Yes, Hannah urged. Marcus, please, let's leave. Marcus turned. His pupils gleamed too wide for the lantern light. A tick pulled at the corner of his jaw. You don't understand. We need a map." He crouched, pulled a grease pencil from his pocket, and began sketching on the concrete floor. Main gallery, vent line, crosscut here. But the lines bent wrong. A straight path curled into a spiral. Crosscuts looped back into themselves. The drawing shifted. No longer a map, but the same spirals and clusters etched into the walls. "Stop," Hannah whispered. "You're copying the symbols." "I'm drawing the mine," Marcus said, breathing fast. "This is what it is. This is how it always was." "Enough," Greg barked, stepping forward. "Hand it over." Marcus didn't move. The pencil scraped another perfect loop. From the ventilation duct came a knock. 3 beats. Then 3 more. The metal hummed with vibration. Ethan lifted his head, listening. Greg grabbed Marcus by the strap of his pack. "We're done here. On your feet." Marcus pulled free with surprising strength. His voice was low, almost certain. "If we walk away now, it won't let us leave." The duct boomed again, closer this time. Their lamps flickered. Somewhere behind them, the old rail cart screeched a few inches forward on rusted wheels. Marcus smiled faintly and snapped the pencil in 2. The stub in his fist pressed against the floor, and the line it left curved by itself into another spiral. A heavy knock shook the duct once more. The darkness leaned in, and the first scream rose from far too close. The scream still echoed when Marcus turned on them. Eyes wide, grin stretched too thin. He lunged without warning, driving Hannah to the ground. His nails tore at her sleeves as he muttered in that jagged rhythm. 3 beats, over and over. "Marcus, stop!" she cried, struggling beneath him. Greg pulled him back, the 3 of them thrashing in the mud, the fallen crowbar clattering by their knees. Marcus fought like a man possessed, strength drawn from somewhere beyond himself. His words spiraled into nonsense. There was no choice. Hannah pressed against his arm. Greg wrenched up the crowbar, and together, they forced him down. One desperate strike, and silence. Marcus lay still, eyes open, the wild light gone. Greg staggered up, chest heaving. "He left us no choice," he rasped. But the words rang hollow. Hannah only shook, tears streaking her face. Now there were 3. For a time, the gallery was quiet, but for their breathing. Then Ethan drifted toward the wall, fingers brushing spirals cut deep into the stone. His lips moved, shaping sounds not meant for language. "Ethan?" Hannah whispered. His eyes glimmered in the lantern light. The miners weren't lost. They were shown the way. "Don't you see? It's clearer now." Greg seized him by the collar. "You saw what it did to Marcus. Snap out of it." But Ethan only smiled. Then, sudden as a trap springing, he lunged at the folder in Greg's grip. The 2 men slammed into the mud, papers scattering. Hannah screamed as lantern beams reeled wildly, shadows leaping. "Stop it, please!" They didn't stop. Their voices tore into shouts, then snarls. Fists struck, mud splattered. A lantern shattered, plunging half the chamber into black. When the echoes died, only Greg rose again. Blood at his mouth, breath ragged. Ethan was gone, swallowed by the dark. Hannah stepped forward, but froze. Greg's eyes had changed. The same glassy gleam, the twitch at his jaw, the hand that trembled, hungry to draw. "Not you," she whispered, shaking her head. Greg smiled thinly. "We'll be fine. We'll finish the map. That's all it wants." He bent to retrieve a shard of pencil. The mine answered first. With a thunderous crack, a timber split. Rock and dust collapsed in a choking wave. Hannah was thrown back. When she opened her eyes, the passage behind her was sealed in rubble, and Greg was gone beneath it. Hannah clawed at the stones until her nails split. "Greg! Greg!" she screamed, voice breaking against the walls. The mine gave no reply. Her strength failed. She fell to her knees, head in her hands, sobbing. Her sobs faltered. They twisted upward into laughter, shaking, broken at first, then steady, falling into the same three-beat rhythm from the reports. Unfamiliar syllables spilled from her mouth, low and fevered, a chant that didn't belong to her. She rose, dropped her pack into the mud, and turned toward the deeper shaft. Without looking back, Hannah walked into the darkness. Her footsteps echoed for a time, then faded. After that night, no one ever saw Hannah again. And deep in the Appalachian hills, Harrow's hollow mine remains, its timbers rotting, its rails rusting, its secrets buried in stone. Silent, patient, waiting for its next shift.
If this story unsettled you, leave a like and let the shadows know. Subscribe for more tales you shouldn't hear after dark. And if you've seen something you can't explain, tell us in the comments. We're always listening.